Hello, I'm Ed Fergel, the curator of the National Museum of the United States Navy in the Washington Navy Yard. The museum was created by the Chief of Naval Operations, Arleigh Burke, in 1961, and we began to create a major World War II exhibit, which is called In Harm's Way, the United States Navy in World War II. It covers 10,000 square feet, which is the size of many museums, much less exhibits. And it is a very comprehensive examination of the United States Navy from the home front to the European theater to the Pacific, looking at the war from a chronological and thematic perspectives. After Admiral Burke returned from a tour of Scandinavia in 1961, he wrote a letter saying that the United States Navy needed to have a comprehensive museum that covered the general history of the Navy, not a specific group such as submarines or aviators. Using that as the basis, that was how the exhibit was developed. So there's aviation, there's submarines, there's surface warfare, there's amphibious warfare, logistics, Seabees, medical, the broad spectrum, it's all here. Some unique artifacts. Right here we have the radar receiver from the battleship New York. It was the first operational radar receiver in the United States Navy. And you see how large it had to be, but the only part that's really important is the receiver's screen. This was put on the battleship New York in 1939. Warships couldn't carry radar unless they were the size of a battleship or an aircraft carrier, because the size of the mast was huge. So we go 4 years later. The American electronics industry is working hard at making radar smaller. Make it so small that this is now the size of the receiver, and the radar mast can be attached to an Avenger torpedo plane. Most of the artillery was actually designed in the Navy Yard, because at that point it was the naval gun factory, including the 5-inch 25 U.S. submarine deck gun that was designed in the middle of the war because the submarine commanders no longer had any Japanese ships that they could torpedo. But there were some small Japanese ships that they were targeting, and they needed a deck gun for that. Above us we have the Corsair, the fighter plane that was originally designed for carriers, but when it was first sent out to the Pacific, there was suspicion that the pilots couldn't see the landing signal officers on the deck of carriers because of the wing shape. So they were assigned to air bases ashore. In 1944, as the Japanese kamikaze threat appeared, more fighter planes were needed. And attack squadrons were removed from the carriers and fighter squadrons were added. And at this point, they weren't building enough Hellcat fighter planes, so they took the Corsairs from their land bases and put them on carriers, and they were very successful. This is a model of the battleship Missouri, one of the 4 Iowa-class battleships that the United States Navy had in World War II. The 16-inch guns were all made in the Naval Gun Factory in Washington, D.C. This model was commissioned by Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal, and he had Gibbs & Cox, the naval engineering and architecture firm, build the model. And he was very specific. He wanted it to look exactly as the ship looked on the 2nd of September 1945 when the Japanese surrendered on board. That included all the equipment, but it also included 2 unique things to that day. One was the table on which the surrender documents were signed, and the other one was a flag that had flown on board Commodore Perry's flagship Powhatan when he had negotiated his treaty with the Japanese in 1854.